Alright, in this video we're going to start to learn about laying out a website design using Photoshop. So go ahead, open up Photoshop, come up to File, New, and we are going to be using one of the newest, greatest features to be added to Photoshop, which is the use of Artboards. So we're going to choose Artboard from right here. Then we need to choose the size that we're going to start with for our first artboard. Now if you're looking for the short answer on width and height, here's what I recommend you start with. It is 1000 by 600, but and keeping in mind that the average website or monitor to display a website is about 1366 pixels by 768. Seems to be the the most common, the most popular nowadays. So why am I going like a full like 350 pixels less? Well, this is the long answer. We're in this place right now where mobile actually comes first, but we're also in a beginning class. So to take all that into consideration right now would be a little bit overwhelming. But I generally don't feel, unless I have a super content rich site that's maybe going to have 3 columns of information, that I need to go much bigger than 1000 pixels. And then I also find that it's easier when I want that website to resize on tablets and phones. Now your results might be quite different, and maybe you don't even know it yet. So this is probably not a bad place to start. You can always increase the size of your artboards. You can always come back here, start over from scratch once you really feel like you've got a grasp on it. And actually with the flexibility of resizing artboards, you don't need to do that. So there's your long answer. Now the short answer to the resolution, we're going to go 144 because we do want to take the advanced approach and go with the ability to dish out high resolution versions of our image once we decide on them. Now that puts us in a weird situation where we actually have to think about our width and height rather than pixels. We'll think about them in points. So, oh, I accidentally selected picas there. Points. And you see it halved our numbers, so we actually have to go back in and beef them up. So if you're following along exactly with me or you're new to this, this is what I'm suggesting. 1000 points by 600 points at double the normal web resolution at 144. I'm going to double click on the hand tool just to, well, actually I want to do a command minus instead to just back out so you can see. First thing that you notice is that the web environment around your artboard, or the canvas as it used to really be thought of in Photoshop, is infinite. So that's the great news, is we can have multiple artboards side by side, almost in the fashion that we do a wire diagram, only we'll be designing the heck out of our wire diagrams. The color that appears alongside of your artboards can be adjusted by right-clicking in here, and that's the default color it comes up with, is a dark gray, and then you can see you have black, medium gray, light gray, and then custom, where you can even pick whatever color you want it to be. Now the custom color that happened to be input in that situation by default was white, so I'd go down to select custom color if I wanted it to be anything else. Click OK, puts that color in. So that at least for now we're on the same page here, I will select the default color. Especially if you're new to Photoshop, I suggest you come over here, set your website up so that over here it's pointing to Essentials. And just to be safe, come down one more time and reset Essentials so that we're now all looking at the same stuff. And one thing that you'll notice right away is in the Layers panel, this represents your artboard and this represents the content. So right now we just have this grouping, which is known as the artboard, and our content below, which will start to grow here in just a second. But if we want to double click here on the word artboard and change that to say something like home page, we can do that, and it looks even more like a wire diagram now. So a logical place to start with is, what color are my pages going to be? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a white website. Would work great for a portfolio. In fact, I'd say probably 90% of them are. Black is also another good color. Especially if it's a portfolio website. Here is where you do not want bright saturated colors, because if they don't distract on all of your art pieces, they will at least distract on some of them. You will have conflicts and clashes, and things will get nasty. A portfolio site is really supposed to be about the work. So let's say that you, either through the use of Adobe Color, the website, or inside of Illustrator, like the video that I had shown you, you came up with some colors. So all you have to do here now in Photoshop is double click on this foreground color swatch, and it pops this menu item open. So if you came from one of those programs I just mentioned with the hexadecimal color, you could just simply Command V, paste that in there, and then wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and go to the color swatches and use the drop down here and add a new swatch and give it a name that makes sense so that it appears down here at the bottom of your swatches. So let's fill in this web page with the color we just selected. The key thing here is to make sure that you're not clicked on the home page, but you're actually clicked on the layer that you want to fill in. And to make it clear what's going on here, I'm going to double click and just name that BG for background. Okay, so as you can see, now it's selected. Now there's shortcuts here for filling with either the, this is known as the foreground color, and this is the background color. So what we do is, to fill with the foreground color, you hold down the Option key and then click the delete key. So that's Option delete at the same time essentially, and if you were trying to fill with the background color, that would be Command delete. So Option delete, Command delete, Option delete, Command delete. And I want Option delete. Now as you can see, the background is probably not helping me very much here with this color, so I am going to change it to black just to give me enough contrast to see what's going on there. So now let's put in a header and a footer, and the way I suggest you do that is you come down here to these different shape options, and the rectangle tool works perfect for that. What you want to make sure is, once you select the rectangle tool up here in the options panel, make sure that you are actually going to fill that as a shape. And then you're going to select the fill color of that shape right here by dropping this down, which gives you your swatch colors. And I'm going to try this color right here, and now all I have to do is just click and drag out a size. And you can see, because we set up our document in points, it's giving us those size in points, which just so happens to be the same thing as using pixel dimensions, but it gets rid of that frustration of the fact that we're at 2x and reading different pixels for it. So this is definitely a much easier way to work. Now we don't have to get all caught up in what the actual height of it is, and if we want it to go all the way across the top, then of course we just look for the dimensions here in points to match the dimensions of our site. But the beauty is, we can always change that later. In fact, you see the properties panel here flew open automatically as soon as we made that. So if we did for some reason have a size already in mind, we could punch that size in here, but that does us really absolutely no good at this time, because we're just working on aesthetics. So, and you can see that it automatically created a new layer for us, and if we really want to be organized crazy, we can go ahead and name this header, and then we can continue on, do the same exact thing, grab the rectangle tool again, make sure it's set to shape, make sure it's set to the color that we want, and we'll go ahead and we'll drag out a footer. And also something to be aware of is that even if I get a little sloppy and I start way over here and I continue on to over here and I even go too far on the bottom, as soon as I release the mouse, it's if you know the term clipping mask, this whole artboard grouping over here essentially creates a clipping mask. So now it's time to choose our font or fonts. Usually websites nowadays just one font, especially if it's a portfolio site, best to just keep things simple. But do we want to go with just web fonts, fonts that we know that everyone will have, or at least a fallback? So if that's the case, fonts that are appropriate for web that everybody has would typically give us our Helvetica, or if you're on a PC, that would be Arial would be the closest thing. So those are your sans serifs. You could also use Verdana, which is also a sans serif, but has a much bigger X height, so some people find it even easier to read on the web. You could also use Georgia. So those would be the three if you just want to keep it easy: Verdana, Georgia, and Helvetica or Arial. Now, if you want to have a lot more choices available, you still have to keep in mind they should be web friendly on your eyes. So you don't want to pick fonts that have a small X height to them. Let's see if I can give you an example here. So the X height is this part of text. It generally represents the overall of a lowercase letter minus, if it has an extender or a descender on it. And generally for the web, it's been concluded that the larger the X height, the more readable the font is, with certain other things in mind. So how do you know that? Well, the best thing is to look at a list that has been pre-sorted by professionals. I just opened up Adobe Muse here so you can get an idea of what may or may not be available to you. So if I just take the text tool and draw out a text box, and I'll just put some sample text in here just so that I get the text options available to me, and we click this down pointing arrow and we go here to add web fonts. Now this I wouldn't even recommend it unless you already have something self-hosted. Don't worry about it. That would be if you bought a font and you wanted to use that. But Muse has the ability to make that available to your users. Then the next category is Edge Web Fonts. These are free and they're hosted by Adobe. So even if you don't have an account, you should be able to use these from the classroom computer. Once you get them up, posted on your website, you're done, even if you never come back to the classroom again. And then for those of you who have an active membership, you can go to these Typekit Web Fonts. In either choice, what you do is you just click here to get started, and if you have the full paid subscription, voila, have at it. Pick some stuff from here. And then if you have just Edge Web Fonts, you're going to have a much smaller choice, but there are some pretty decent fonts in here. Now the only thing is, will you be able to see these same fonts in Photoshop when you design? And unfortunately, you probably won't. So you're going to have to walk that balance of how you want to achieve that. If you have the Typekit fonts, there's a bigger chance that you would be able to also open those in Photoshop. And you can learn more about this online if you're the adventurous type. You do have a filter in here which will filter out if you just want serif fonts to look at, and then you can scroll through them. And you can see even in the Adobe Edge fonts, there's still quite a few to choose from. You just have quite a bit more here that you're paying for as part of the subscription. So if that all seems overwhelming to you, then just go back to Photoshop and stick with either Verdana, Georgia, Helvetica, or Arial. I'm going to finish this up by just showing people that do have the paid subscription. You notice here that you can't get the Edge fonts, but you can go in and pick your Typekit fonts. When you click on this, it'll take you into a menu. You have to sign in with your Adobe credentials, And then since you're doing web design, just make sure that you make the availability for just web fonts and